welcome back to the Nerdy Grail. Now, about a week ago, I did a video ranking all of the classic series of Doctor Who from William Hartnell in 1963 all the way to Sylvester McCoy's final season in 1989, and I also decided to include the Paul McGann TV movie from 1996. And I mentioned that that was just part one, and that I was going to get round to doing part two, where I was going to look at the modern series of Doctor Who when it came back in 2005 with Christopher Eccleston, all the way up and including the current Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, from last year's 2024 season 1. Now, I did mention that I am more of a classic Whovian than a modern Whovian, and that is true. I do prefer the classic series. I just feel like back in the classic series, it was a lot more true to form, a lot more, having adventures in space, bit of fun. And also, the numbering system of the Doctors was a lot easier to know about. I feel like I could do a whole video rant on how the modern era of the show messed up the numbering system, because in Classic Who, it was simply Doctors 1 through 8. That was it. William Hartnell's was Paul McGann. Easy peasy. But then with the introduction of the Time War, Christopher Eccleston not wanting to come back to do the 50th anniversary, meaning that a whole new incarnation of the Doctor in the form of John Hurt's War Doctor needed to be introduced. That messed up the numbering system. The 10th Doctor deciding he didn't want to regenerate, so decided to keep the same face. So you had two versions of the 10th Doctor, meaning that the 10th Doctor took up both slots 10 and 11. And then all the stuff that went on with the Timeless Children, the Doctor being the Timeless Child, the Fugitive Doctor, and it's just the numbering system is a complete mess at this point with Modern Who. So I just like it because it was more simple. Doesn't mean that I hate the modern era. I do like the modern era. It's just if I had to choose between classic and modern series, I would go towards the classic series. But in today's video, like I said, I am going to be ranking the modern era of the show from Christopher Eccleston in 2005 to Joy to the World, really. The recent Christmas special we had in 2024 with Ncuti Gatwa. And I will give a little bit of a mini review on that episode since I didn't do a review when it first came out. I am wearing my Tom Baker 4th Doctor shirt, as in the last video I wore my Colin Baker one, so I thought I'd rock out the other Baker. So, let's waste no more time now. I have done a little bit of a mini rant, I apologise, but let's jump straight into this tier list, ranking every season of Modern Who from Christopher Eccleston in 2005 to the current era with Ncuti Gatwa in 2024. Okay, and now we are moving straight into the Ranking the Modern Series tier list. We've got all the seasons down the bottom here, with Christopher Eccleston from 2005 all the way to Ncuti Gatwa in Season 1. So without any further ado, let's get straight into this, starting with Season 1, which came back in 2005 after Doctor Who was originally put on hiatus back in 1989, then came back in 1996 for a failed TV movie starring Paul McGann. Even though I really enjoyed the TV movie, it didn't quite hit the audience that it needed, and so it never fully got to get the ground running from that little pilot movie. But then it eventually came back with Russell T Davies in 2005, and Season 1 is an absolute banger. Brilliant. They introduced the concept of the Time War. The Doctor sort of goes through a little bit of like PTSD, really. He's struggling to connect with humanity and sort of has to build himself back up again. Really, really good. Really, really solid. Billie Piper as Rose Tyler as the companion is really good in Season 1 and a lot better than in Season 2. Their relationship is perfect. And there's some fantastic episodes in here. End of the World is a brilliant one. Dalek is a fantastic story. The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances are two amazing stories. The Empty Child was actually my very first ever Modern Who story, and what a story to start on. It was terrifying. And then we got stories like Boomtown, which is a fun little gap filler story. And then a fantastic finale in Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways, a proper Dalek war. The only negative story in this season for me is The Long Game. It was a bit hit or miss. And I would say another negative of Season 1 is probably just the lack of environment changes. A lot of Eccleston's season takes place on like a space station. Like End of the World is on a space station, The Long Game is on a space station, Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways all on a space station. And 3 of those is the exact same space station as well, so it's like, But other than that, it's a fantastic season. Christopher Eccleston's a fantastic Doctor. I love practically every story in this season apart from Long Game, and even then I think that's just mid. So for me, season 1, easy S tier. Then we got David Tennant in his first season, in his first run as the Doctor. Billy Piper carrying over as Rose Tyler. Um, this season is not as good as season 1, if I'm being perfectly honest. Mainly to do with the fact that the Doctor and Rose sort of try to have this like romantic relationship, and that's not what the Doctor's about. He never did that in the classic series. It first started with the TV movie with Paul McGann's Doctor kissing his companion Grace Holloway, and then they just carried that on then in the modern series. I'm not a huge fan of it, and the implications that it has for later Tennant seasons, in season 3 in particular. But there is some good stories in this, like School Reunion is fantastic, bringing back classic series companion Sarah Jane Smith, again played by Elizabeth Sladen, and John Leeson returning as K9. There's some other great stories like Rise of the Cybermen, Age of Steel, bringing the Cybermen back. A fantastic finale in Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, apart from the last 20 minutes when the Doctor and Rose have like a lovey-dovey moment on a beach. But Daleks vs Cybermen is something we've wanted for a long time, so that was brilliant. And Impossible Planet and Satan Pit is fantastic, with the voice of Gabriel Wolf, who voices Sutekh in both the modern series and the classic series now, as the Beast was brilliant. It's not a bad series, but a lot of the lovey-dovey stuff, and a couple of weak episodes like Love and Monsters, Fear Her, and I'm not a huge fan of Tooth and Claw either. Idiot's Lantern isn't the best either. Push this to a B tier for me personally. And yeah, keep in mind this is my personal opinion. Season 3, however, I'm going to put this straight away in A tier, and I'll explain why. I do actually like Season 3 better, because I think the Doctor and companion relationship is a lot better. Martha Jones, played by Freema Agyeman, is a fantastic companion and highly underrated in my opinion. She doesn't take the Doctor's crap, even when he's moaning about losing Rose, which this is the one issue I have with Season 3, is the Doctor is quite mean in the first half of the series to his companion, because he's just pining over Rose, and that is silly. The Doctor's had so many companions in the past, you know, and he's had companions straight up, you know, die on him. Adric, and Katarina, if you want to really pull that one out the bag in the Daleks Master Plan whenever that comes out. But yeah, he's had actual proper reasons to be upset about a companion departure. But here, he's taking it too far, and it spoils it a bit. There's the iconic scene in the Shakespeare Code where him and Martha are sat on a bed in William Shakespeare's house. Shakespeare's Code's a fantastic story, by the way. And he's sort of not sure what to do. He turns to Martha for advice. Martha's still new, so doesn't really know what advice to give him. He sort of whines, saying that Rose would know what to do, and oh, it doesn't matter because I'll take you home in the morning. It's like you don't say that to a companion, and it's just wrong. It's not doctory. But there is some good stories in this season, like Blink is the first Weeping Angel story, and it's terrifying. They bring the Master back in this season for a three-parter of Utopia, Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords. You got a good introduction story to this thing known as the Chameleon Arch, which the Time Lord essence can be put in a fob watch to hide from threats, and that's what the Doctor does in a two-parter, Human Nature and Family of Blood. And then that's how the Master returns at the end of the series, and later on in like the Fugitive Doctor in Jodie's era. Other interesting stories in this one, I'd say I don't mind the concept of Daleks Master Plan and Evolution of the Daleks. They're trying to go down that route of Power of the Daleks. It just wasn't executed very well, in my opinion. The introduction of the Shadow Proclamation with the Jadoon. The Jadoon are great. They're fun. You know, the return of the Macra in Gridlock. There's a lot here, but which is why it's A tier. But unfortunately, it's not S tier, mainly because of how the Doctor acts. Season 4, I'm also going to put straight in A tier, and I know that would make a lot of people very happy, but also there'll be some people saying, why is that not S tier? Well, yes, you've got David Tennant and Catherine Tate teaming up for the first time, because they'll do that again later on. The Doctor and Donna are a fantastic partnership, and Donna, again, is a fantastic companion for the 10th Doctor. Doesn't put up with his rubbish, but by this point, the 10th Doctor has mellowed out a little bit, sort of gotten over the Rose thing, moved on a little bit. But you've got the new plotline of the Doctor Donna, which is an interesting one, which again carries over into the 60th anniversary. And yeah, you got some returning villains from Classic Who again here as well. Like Davros returns in the finale, Stolen Earth and Journey's End, which is like a big final hurrah to everything RTD. All the previous companions and stuff are in this. From Sarah to Jackie to Mickey. Everyone is literally in it. Martha, Rose comes back, because that's an overarching theme in this as well, the return of Rose Tyler. The introduction of Professor River Song in Silence of the Library and Forest of the Dead is brilliant. You know, there's some fun stories like The Unicorn and the Wasp and Agatha Christie Murder Mystery, really, really good. You know, there is some solid ones. The Return of the Sontarans in the Sontaran Stratagem and Poison Sky. It's really good. And Martha even comes back for a couple of stories as a companion again. So it is really, really nice. I do like it. It's a solid season, not quite S tier, but a fun one. Then the finale of the original RTD era, we've got the specials with The Next Doctor, Planet of the Dead, Waters of Mars, and End of Time Part 1 and 2. For me, they are, again, probably about B tier. I really love Waters of Mars. That's my favourite 10th Doctor story, where he goes full Time Lord victorious, thinking that because he's the last of the Time Lords, he can do whatever he wants. Some okay stories like Planet of the Dead, which is an Easter special, and The Next Doctor, where they're sort of teasing that David Tennant's going to be going by saying, oh, this could be the next incarnation, but it's actually not. And then you got The End of Time Part 1 and 2, which I love The End of Time, but I despise the way that the 10th Doctor goes out. He goes out very unheroic. Sure, he saves Wilf, but he has a major strop and a tantrum about it. He whines, he cries, he moans. It's, again, not very doctory. And it's a shame, because the 10th Doctor deserved to go out a bit better, and he would have gone out better if he hadn't done that. But it's good. We get to see the return of the Time Lords, of Rassilon, of Gallifrey. The Master comes back again in a very weird way. But yeah, and his last line of I don't want to go, again, I'm not a big fan of it. Good regeneration in terms of how it's all grand, you know, explodes and blows up the TARDIS pretty much, but yeah. But yeah, it's not a good way to start a new era of the show, if I'm being honest. But overall, because of Waters of Mars and other stories, it gets a B tier. Matt Smith's first season, season 5, for me, is also in A tier. Matt Smith and Stephen Moffat take the reins here, with Karen Gillan as Amy Pond, new companion, and Arthur Darvill as Rory Williams. We see River Song, played by Alex Kingston, come back a lot more in the Matt Smith era now. This is where she mostly shines, and she's really, really good when she's in it. We got a bit of a subplot about, Silence Will Fall. They're setting up the Matt Smith era. Silence Will Fall, the Pandorica, which the Pandorica is the core theme of this, and the cracks in the wall, and the cracks in time, causing energy to bleed through and wipe things from existence. It's really interesting. And the fact that Amy Pond lives in a house on her own, is a huge house. Why is she on her own? Why can't she remember things that she should? She's about to get married to Rory. It's, there's lots going on while introducing a new Doctor. They get some returning villains again, like the Silurians come back. The Dream Lord, who, in my opinion, is definitely trying to tease, as he could have been the Valiard. You could have just used the Valiard. But there's an interesting story. The Weeping Angels have another 2-parter. Victory of the Daleks, where they introduce the Paradigm Daleks, but then they never get used again. They use like twice more, but by season 7 they're gone. So it's waste, really. They were cool. They were more threatening, deeper voices and a larger body as well. They towered over the Doctor. And a decent finale in the Pandorica opens, with all the villains coming together to trap the Doctor because they think he's going to destroy the universe. But then they ruin it in the Big Bang and just have one stone Dalek chasing the Doctor, Amy and Rory, and all around a museum. Kind of lackluster and boring, if you ask me. But yeah, overall a fun season, and I think it's probably one of Matt Smith's best, if I'm honest. Season 6, unfortunately, for me, is a D tier. I'm not a huge fan of season 6. The whole plotline of the Doctor's death, and we see him die at the start. How are we going to get to it? And he's the star character. We've just had him. He's not due to leave, so it was sort of like, we know how this is going to end. We know he's going to either get out of it somehow, or it's not the real Doctor. They went with it's not the real Doctor. So I predicted it literally 5 minutes after seeing it. It was a bit boring. There is some good stories in this season, like the Rebel Flesh and Almost People doppelganger story, really creepy. The Doctor's wife is a very dark one. You get to see the TARDIS in human form. They bring back the 9th and 10th Doctor's TARDIS interior briefly as well, which is interesting. And we have an Ood. I also like The Girl Who Waited, where there's 2 Amys at different points in the time stream, and Rory has to go in to save her because the Doctor can't. So they're pretty cool. But apart from those stories, I mean, Night Terrors as well with the Dollhouse is not too bad. They introduced Vastra, Jenny, and Strax in the finale of season 6, part 1, which they can become a bit of a thing then, the Paternoster gang. But overall, season 6, a bit lackluster if I'm honest. I wasn't huge on it. Season 7, I had a lot more respect for it before. It's still okay, but for me it is bang on average okay, season 7, which is in 2 parts, part A and part B. Part A is 11, Amy and Rory, like the final for that team, and then you move on to 11 and Clara. The 11 Amy and Rory stuff is okay. You know, it's just about the fall of the ponds. Some okay stories in there, like I don't mind The Town Called Mercy. And Angels Take Manhattan, even though it has a ridiculous plotline with the Statue of Liberty, it is still a fun story and I really like it. And Amy and Rory's departure did make me cry. And then you got the Clara stuff, which I used to really love Clara. I still think Clara's okay, but the whole fact that they prophesized and made it like this grand person of she's destined to save the Doctor in all his incarnations, all through time. Why can't you just have a normal companion? We're supposed to be able to, as an audience, you know, connect with that companion and think of them as us, but you can't with Clara. She's too special. And it's just like, yeah, so I wasn't a huge fan of that. But there is some good stories in the Clara start half. Like, I love Cold War because I'm a massive Ice Warrior fan and they brought the Ice Warriors back. I think Crimson Horror is quite a fun one with the Paternoster gang as well. Name of the Doctor is really interesting and full of Easter eggs. They also introduce the brand new incarnation of the Doctor that is sandwiched between Paul McGann and Christopher Eccleston, played by John Hurt, known as the War Doctor. So that was really interesting, setting up the 50th anniversary. Yeah, there's lots of little bits and pieces in here. I quite like it. The Rings of Akhaten with one of the famous speeches of the 11th Doctor. Yeah, there's lots to love, but there's also a fair bit to hate. Like, I'm not a fan of Nightmare in Silver. I'm not a fan of the Moffat-era Cybermen, if I'm honest. And it's a shame because the Cybermen are my second favourite villains in Doctor Who. Angie and Artie, they are annoying characters, and so they outstay their welcome too much. And yeah, there's just a bunch of lackluster stories. Like, Hyde had an interesting premise, but was a bit rubbish. Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS, you know, seeing the inside of the TARDIS and all its rooms. Great idea, poor execution. You know, so it was just a shame, really. Now, the 50th anniversary ones, I decided to put these as separate just because I feel like they deserved it, really. The 50th anniversary specials and Time of the Doctor, so Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor are A tier. I think as a 50th anniversary, Day of the Doctor is a fun story. However, I'm of the belief that it's not a true 50th anniversary of the show because it's predominantly focused on the Time War, which is a new Who creation. The only classic stuff in this is Tom Baker cameos as the Curator, a future version of the Doctor who's now retired, and you've got the Zygons back. And that's about it. They do have a little special, Night of the Doctor, which preludes before Day of the Doctor, which actually shows you Paul McGann regenerate into the War Doctor, so you do get a classic Doctor there, for even if it's just for like 5 minutes. But that's about it, really. Sure, all the Doctors come back to save the day, but it's like archived stock footage. So really, it's more of a New Who celebration. It's done pretty well, and it's fun, and Matt Smith, John Hurt, and David Tennant do a fantastic job. Nice seeing Billie Piper back in a bit of a different role as well. As the Moment. And to see the Time War finally was great. And John Hurt did a fantastic job. And then Time of the Doctor is an interesting final story for Matt Smith's Doctor. I quite like it, but my only criticism with it is he's the youngest actor to play the Doctor, and he spends most of it as an old man. Like Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, you want to see... If it's the final story of your Doctor, you've got to keep in mind that this Doctor is someone's favourite, so they want to see them as they love them. But for most of the story, he's either naked, weird to say I know, bald, or extremely elderly. He's not the Doctor that you know on screen for most of the story, and that's a shame. But brilliant speech at the end, probably the best regeneration speech ever from the 11th Doctor about change and we need to go on and we won't forget who we are. I love it. It's brilliant. But yeah, it's really, really good. I do like that. So A tier. Now, bit of bias. Peter Capaldi is my favourite New Who Doctor, but I'm not going to be biased because I do have some thoughts on his era. Firstly, season 8, I'm putting in B tier. It's a decent season. I do like the dark tone of Capaldi. especially after the more light-hearted tone of Matt Smith. Gives you vibes, if you're a classic Who fan, of Peter Davison regenerating into Colin Baker, only Peter Capaldi is not as extreme as Colin Baker was in The Twin Dilemma. But that dark nature's great. Introduces you to Missy, who we find out is the female incarnation of the Master, so that's really cool. And yeah, some interesting concepts for stories like Into the Dalek, travelling inside the Doctor's worst enemy. Robot Sherwood, a Robin Hood story there. The Doctor's banter with him is brilliant. Time Heist is an okay. The Caretaker to set all in Coal Hill School's nice for some Easter eggs. But yeah, and seeing Kate Lethbridge Stewart. And I didn't mention Kate in season 7, but from season 7 onwards, there's a character called Kate Lethbridge Stewart, who's the daughter of the Brigadier from the classic series. And she is the Brigadier for New Who. The Brigadier in the classic series met every incarnation of the classic series Doctors, apart from the 6th Doctor. Kate Lethbridge Stewart, apart from the 9th Doctor, meets all of the modern Who Doctors, from 10 all the way to 15. So you see her a lot. So yeah, she's really cool as well. I like her. There's a bit of a lovey-dovey thing going on with Clara in this season, as she's sort of, now that she's gotten over that her Doctor is regenerated into an older Doctor, and so her little love-struck crush is gone. She's now fallen for one of the other teachers in the school, who's Danny Pink. He's an alright character, but underdeveloped and underused, and it's such a shame. So it kind of spoils the season a bit. But it's nice to have some conflict, because she tries to hide the Doctor from Danny a lot for some reason. It's really weird. Season 9, I'm not a huge fan of Season 9. It's not terrible, but I would say it is probably D tier. They have this plotline of the hybrid, which half Time Lord, half another species, which they have going around the series. They don't do it in a great way. The season is full of two-parters, which you would think is an interesting concept, but it's poorly executed most of the time. And there's another character called the Shielder, or Me, played by Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones, who's okay, but again, she's just a Jack Harkness copy. Yeah, I'm just not a fan of season 9, if I'm honest. I apart from Hellbent, which is not Hellbent, Heaven Sent. Heaven Sent is the one I like, where it's just the Doctor and a villain in a tower for the whole story. It's brilliant. You need to watch it. And Face the Raven, Clara's death episode is fantastic. Spoilt in Hellbent, but yeah. We finally do get to see Gallifrey again. Kate comes back again. The Zygons come back for an actual two-parter because their role in the 50th was rubbish. But yeah, it's okay. Not the best season, if I'm honest, though. However, season 10, and people may be shocked for this, but season 10 for me is my favourite Capaldi season and one of my favourite seasons of Modern Who. I love it. 12, Bill, and Nardole is a fantastic TARDIS team, hands down. Like my opinions on 4, Sarah and Harry, I love them so much. They bounce off each other so well. This plotline, the first half is to do with a thing called the Vault, where the Doctor is sort of forced to stay on Earth and look after Missy, who's trapped in the Vault, through an oath. And so he becomes a university professor where he meets Bill. And then the second half is sort of the Doctor wanting to go back out into the universe, but he's unsure if he can trust Missy in order to not go bad again. There's some really good stories in this. The Ice Warrior story, again, is brilliant. Empress of Mars. They bring back Alpha Centauri for a cameo, who was in the John Pertwee Peladon stories from the 70s. Played by the same person as well. We also get the Mondasian Cybermen in the finale from 10th Planet. I adore the Mondasians. And John Sim returns as the Master, who we haven't seen since the end of Time Part 2. So that is really good. So the first multi-Master story as well. And there's also a nice monk trilogy in the middle, where the villains are not meddling monks, they're just these monks. And they have a mini arc of the Doctor being blind, which is weird. But it's an interesting one. But I quite liked it. So season 10 is fantastic. And it sort of sets up the end for Capaldi's Doctor as well. Because the Doctor falls, he gets attacked by a Cyberman and starts to regenerate. He's holding it off. He meets his first incarnation at the end. And they go on a little adventure in Twice Upon a Time where they both decide to regenerate at the end. Hartnell into Troughton, Capaldi into the next Doctor, played by Jodie Whittaker, the 13th incarnation and the first female incarnation of the Doctor as well, which I really I really think is a bit underrated, Jodie Whittaker, a little bit. I appreciate her a lot more now. Which, speaking of which, I'm going to be a bit of a hypocrite here and say that season 11 is actually my least favourite of all of Modern Who. Yeah, even though I do have a better appreciation for Jodie now, I will say her first season is an utter train wreck. Chris Chibnall was trying to go through like a new thing of refresh everything for a new audience. So new Doctor, new companions, new TARDIS interior, new sonic screwdriver. Barely any references, if no references to previous eras of the show, apart from obviously post-regeneration stuff where she references that she was Peter Capaldi before. And a Fez randomly in one of the episodes. The only episodes in this season I like is The Woman Who Fell to Earth and Rosa. All the rest are either subpar or just rubbish. Rubbish entirely. I don't like the direction they went. It wasn't very good. So I'm sorry. It's just not my cup of tea. Season 12, then, for me, is then C tier. So it's a lot better from Jodie. It has a lot of references to the classic series and previous series of the show. They bring back the Master, played by Sacha Dhawan, who is amazing. They bring back Captain Jack Harkness, the Judoon. They introduce a new incarnation of the Doctor known as the Fugitive Doctor, which messes with the number system like there's no tomorrow. And they also bring back the Cybermen. They do an interesting thing with the Cybermen and have what's known as a lone Cyberman, which is really cool. And you then have the dreaded Timeless Child arc. Oh boy, I need to do a whole video on that. I'm not going to go into details on that now, but I feel like I should do a video eventually on the Timeless Child. It's one that really upset people at the time, and still a few people are upset by it. And they're going to probably double down on it more in Shooty's upcoming seasons. But yeah, I think overall it's a pretty fun season. Like the Haunting of Villa Diodati with the Lone Sideman is great. That part in particular. Fugitive of the Judoon I like. Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror I quite like. And Spyfall Part 1 in particular, with the O reveal to be the Master in disguise, was brilliant. So yeah, season 12 is an average season, because there is a lot of stinkers, like Orphan 55, Praxius, and Can You Hear Me? I think it's Can You Hear Me? But those three in particular, terrible. Garbage. Utter garbage. Season 13, otherwise known as Flux, for me is B tier. It's my favourite season of Jodie. I think she does really, really well in this. Because of the COVID restrictions, they couldn't work with a lot of cast. They had a limited episode count. And they did really well. It introduces new companion Dan, which in Jodie's era you had lots of new companions. You had Ryan, Graham, and Yaz. Too many. And now you just got Dan and Yaz after Ryan and Graham left in the New Year's special Revolution of the Daleks prior to this, which saw the return of Captain Jack Harkness again. Flux is really, really interesting. It had some very good villains. The return of the Sontarans as villains. The Weeping Angels came back. And again, they do a bit like the Tennant era and set up Jodie's end by foreshadowing that her time's coming to its end. So it was done pretty well, but I think having an event that destroys half the universe is going to definitely come back to bite the show at some point, because how can you treat the universe the same when supposedly it's been completely wiped out, half the universe being completely wiped out, and as far as I'm aware, they haven't rectified that. So, oops. Then you got the season 13 specials, which I did also decide to separate a bit like the Tennant ones. I think this is A tier for me because I love Eva the Daleks. Fantastic time loop Dalek story. Very claustrophobic in feel. Feels a bit like Dalek again. Really, really good. Legend of the Sea Devils is an awful story. It sees the return of the Sea Devils, but they are done terribly. It is a pathetic story. I can't stand it, and I haven't gone back to rewatch it since. But then you've got what I think is the true 60th and 50th anniversary special, The Power of the Doctor, where you've got the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Master, the return of Tegan and Ace from the classic series. More companions return at the end, like Jo Grant, Melanie Bush, Ian Chesterton. You've also got, Kate. You've got previous Doctors return, played by David Bradley, Peter Davison, Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Paul McGann, and then the surprise regeneration at the end, thinking Shooty's coming, but actually it's the 14th Doctor, played by David Tennant again. Fantastic. I love it. I think it's a really fun story. I have watched it so many times. I just think it's brilliant, and the references galore. Tegan and Five having a conversation about Adric blows me away. It makes me tear up even thinking about it. I love it. And Ace talking to Seven, oh, it really hits me in the feels. I love this story so much. So that's why it's getting A tier. It'd get A tier for Power of the Doctor alone, but Eve of the Daleks is also fantastic. Speaking of the 60th anniversary, we've now got the 60th anniversary specials, which for me, they are B tier. I can't get them higher than B tier because they sort of let me down a little bit. They don't feel like a 60th anniversary of the show. Power of the Doctor feels like the 60th, because in this it feels just like season 4B, because you've got David Tennant and Catherine Tate back again. You've also got Bernard Cribbins for his last performance as Wilfred Mott, bless his soul. The only thing from the past you've got in this is Mel comes back, which is great, and the Toymaker. And the first story is called The Star Beast, which is an adaptation of a comic book which came out years and years ago with the Fourth Doctor. But they do their own take and don't reference that at all. While Blue Yonder is an interesting story, smack bang in the middle, they tried to do lots of secrecy at the time of While Blue Yonder, but I don't get why. It's a bit weird, because nothing in it. It's just Doctor and Donna facing some doppelgangers of themselves who want to get to Earth, to their universe, to terrorise it. And then the giggle, the first 40 minutes is brilliant. It's the Doctor versus the Toymaker again. The Toymaker taunting the Doctor about all the things that's happened between his 10th incarnation and 14th, where you get to see him reference Amy Pond, Clara Oswald, Bill, and the Flux. And then you get the regeneration, or the bi-regeneration, where the 14th Doctor starts to regenerate, but instead he splits into two, keeping both 14 alive and 15 coexisting at the same time. Not a huge fan of that, if I'm honest. It's an interesting concept, but they should have left that. It shouldn't have happened. And also because 14 finally got the ending that 10 deserved. He goes out strong, goes out not cowardly, says Analzy at the end, but yet he's still around. Why, RTD? Why? You take back control and you ruin it. But then finally we've got season 1 with Ncuti Gatwa, and for me this is C tier. Smack bang in the middle, because I was a bit disappointed, if I'm perfectly honest. It's 8 stories, 2 stories of Doctor Light. You shouldn't do that in a first season of a new Doctor. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the direction that they're taking. Ncuti is a decent Doctor, don't get me wrong, but I am struggling to connect with him a little bit. And what they do to my boy Sutekh, because Sutekh comes back at the end of this, is just criminal. It's criminal. If you watch the Pyramids of Mars, the proper Pyramids of Mars, not the Tales of the TARDIS version, which I'm not a fan of the Tales from the TARDIS version. I've had conversations with my fiance about that. But if you watch the normal version, you'll see how badly they do Sutekh then in this. I'm very disappointed. And the fact that supposedly Sutekh's been around clinging to the TARDIS since Pyramids of Mars, get out of here. That's a load of rubbish. The amount of stuff that goes on between Pyramids of Mars and The Legend of Ruby Sunday, there's no way Sutekh stays on board the TARDIS or allows the TARDIS to get hurt or destroyed or dismantled or controlled by other forces. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. I don't know what RTD was thinking. It's just naff. But yeah, so middle of the ground. It's not terrible, but it's not impressed me either. So hopefully, fingers crossed, season 2 does impress me. But that is going to be my little tier list. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause this video and I'm going to give you just a brief mini review of the Christmas special that's just gone, Joy to the World, because I didn't actually do a review on it. So I just want to give you some brief thoughts on it. But that is my tier list, so I hope you enjoyed seeing that, and just remember this is my opinion. But stay tuned, because I'm going to do a quick mini review on Joy to the World. Okay, so like I said, this is just going to be very, very quick, very, very brief. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is just my quick thoughts on Joy to the World and where I'd add it to the tier list if I was to add it to the tier list. Look, Joy to the World, it was okay. It was, I said this to my fiance, for me, it's the definition of a mid-episode. One of my big criticisms with it, firstly, is the fact that the Doctor doesn't need to be there yet again. Another story that you could have made a Doctor Light story. the Doctor doesn't impact the plot at all, really. You could have taken him out or replaced him with someone else, and the story would have mostly gone the exact same. It was pointless, really, if I'm being honest. And another one of my criticisms is how political it is, which, no, it's not really a criticism. You know, it's fine, because a lot of my favourite Doctor Who stories have been, like, quite heavily political stories. Like, The Caves of Androzani is one of my favourite Doctor Who stories of all time. You can't get more political than that story. It's absolutely brilliant. The Sunmakers is about taxes from the Fourth Doctor's era, and I find that story to be hilarious and great fun to watch. So I've got nothing against political stories. But I just think it's a bit weird the way they do it in this story, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. Like, they hammer home COVID quite a lot in this story. And it is bizarre. It's done in an emotional way for you to be able to connect to the character Joy at one point. But I don't know. It was just a bit bizarre. And again, there was a bit of men bashing again at the end, at one point in the story, which I was like, cringy. I thought we weren't going to do that anymore. Why have we got to do that? Why have we got to criticise someone if they're male? Why have we got to criticise someone if they're female? Why have we got to criticise someone if they're gay or whatever? Why do we have to criticise people for who or what they are? You know, if you're not harming anyone, leave them be. You know, I don't get this, if I'm honest. Why it's cruel, but yeah, I don't know. And visually, it's an okay looking story. You can still see the production value going in. It just felt like not much happened. And Joy as a character, she did all right, but they bigged her up so much in the trailer, and I forgot she was in it at one point. They set up the Doctor being trapped on Earth for a whole year with another woman, who should have been the new companion, by the way. I think the way they set her up, she should have become the new companion. Although I am looking forward to the actual new companion next season. But it's just weird, because Joy doesn't really play much of a role, if I'm being honest. So it was disappointing. So if you want my honest opinions, I would say Joy to the World, I'd give a 5 out of 10. And if I was to put it on the tier list, it would go C tier to debatably D tier, if I'm honest. But yeah, that's just my little brief thoughts on Joy to the World. But I hope you did enjoy this video. Please like it by giving it a thumbs up, comment down below your thoughts on the modern era, and subscribe if you are new. But for now, this is the Nerdy Grail signing off. I hope you have an amazing day, and I will see you all next time. Bye for now, everyone.